Guru Radhe, Radhe Guru, Guru Radhe Guru.
Hello and welcome. In this episode of My Time with Radha, I speak with Swami Sukhananda about her time with Swami Radha and the teachings. We talk about the power of the practices and how they can cultivate an inner sense of peace. Hello, Swami Sukhananda.
Hello.
It's such a pleasure to have you here with me today for this new episode of My Time with Radha, especially because I feel like over the time that I've been kind of at the ashram and offering karma yoga there's been quite a lot of times when you and I work quite closely together, like you've kind of supervised different things that I've done. And yet we've never really gotten a chance to kind of sit down and talk about the kind of questions I'm going to ask you. So I'm looking forward to hearing your answers.
Yeah, well, it's great to see you, and you're right, it's true.
So we'll start to pull on the thread and hear your precious stories. And I just thought we could begin with a prayer together. Is there one you would like to recite together?
Let's say the Divine Mother prayer. O Divine Mother, may all my speech and idle talk be mantra, all actions of my hands be mudra, all eating and drinking be the offering of oblations unto thee, all lying down prostrations before thee. May all pleasures be as dedicating my entire self unto thee. May everything I do be taken as thy worship.
Thank you for that. So let's begin from the beginning. How did you get involved with the teachings of Yasodhara Ashram, and when did you first meet Swami Radha?
Well, of course, I was born in England, and for the first 40 years, there was no internet. So that kind of sets a context. It took a few steps for me to get to know anything about the teachings of Swami Radha. But what's been coming to my mind, because this is our 60th anniversary, is what happened to me in that winter of 1962-63. I was a child then, obviously, and I often got sick in the winter, weak chest, bronchitis, that kind of thing. But that particular winter, I discovered that I could sit still and I could enter this other place. And it was a place with mountains and forest and a big expanse of water, but fairly narrow. And I didn't know where the place was. It happened for a few days that I could do this, and then I sort of stopped. But I realized it was a place of a community and that most of the people there were women. So what I did was I was really into maps in those days, and I drew a full contour map where the buildings were and all this kind of thing. And I collected a box of cut-out women. I couldn't figure out what their names were, but I'd got a kit, as it were. And then I tried to work out where it was. So I obviously had the idea that it was a real place. And I couldn't find out where it was. My best guess, because I'd never travelled much at that stage, was that it was on the west coast of Scotland, because the islands are fairly close to the land there and there's a kind of interesting coastline. But I couldn't spot anything that I felt matched it. And I thought about Sweden a little, but that's as far as it went. I kind of gave up. Obviously, as time was to tell, my mistake was thinking it was ocean rather than what it is as a lake, because I didn't know about large lakes like this, you know. So anyway, that was then. But it wasn't until my teens that I thought about going to North America. And I just had the idea that I really needed to go to North America and that I needed to get a job there so that I would actually have time to explore North America. But again, I didn't connect those two ideas at all. And I didn't connect the idea of North America with yoga or, or anything really. And I did then get a job in the 1980s in Ottawa. And because I was already practicing yoga then, I was very picky when I arrived in Ottawa about the teachers. And so I phoned up the local teachers and interviewed them. And I landed on Lynn at the Radha Centre. And I got an apartment just round the corner. So that's how I got connected with the teachings. And still, no connections in my mind, no pennies had dropped of any kind, you know. But then one night, and it must have been in 1986, I was trying to think about it, but I was alone in my apartment and I heard someone in the apartment. It woke me up and I sat up and I was kind of scared, but then I thought it's a harmless presence. It's not something fearful. And I sat there while someone who I couldn't see approached me really slowly with very small steps. And I moved over in the bed and this person sat down and said, "I am not the body, I am not the mind." And that was it, really. That was how I met her. So it was another 2 years after that before I actually met her in person. And I think even longer than that before I realised that I had a confirmation that it was her when I saw her walking, because she had arthritis and she took very small, slow steps. And that was when I realised that that's when I'd been sitting in the bed waiting, as it were, for her to actually come into the room and reach my bed. So it was a bit of a different sort of introduction, necessitated, I suppose, by the fact that I was a long way away in England.
Wow. And of course, this interview is being recorded audio version, but we're seeing each other and my jaw just dropped open hearing that. That is incredible. And did you, when that specific moment happened, and then we'll move forward to how things developed, but when that moment occurred, were you like doubtful, or what was your initial response to it?
Yeah, it's hard to re-enter that, actually. I knew something important had happened. And one of the things that Swami Radha says is that you can tell the difference between a spiritual experience and an imagination because it stays with you and it somehow affects your life. You know, you live differently. And so that really would be it. That would set the scene for me, that I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't know what she was like. So it wasn't like I was going to the Radha Centre and really kind of wanting to know who Swami Radha was. I was just attending classes. And so I wasn't putting things together. I was just going, that's strange. And then it wasn't until I kind of went to leave Canada and go back to England, and then I suddenly discovered this was a big mistake, that was not what I had to do. And I came back again very quickly.
So you had that experience. You were living, where were you, in Calgary then?
Ottawa.
Oh, in Ottawa. Oh, yes. Okay. In Ottawa. And you had that experience. And then shortly after you went back to England and came back to Canada.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then when was the first time you met her sort of face to face in her physicality?
It was during the YDC in 1988.
And what was that like? Was she teaching at the time?
No, she wasn't. She wasn't very well, but she gave us a few talks. So I didn't really get to know her at that point at a personal level. But I did stay on. So then I met with her more.
Wow. Well, and it sounds kind of like you were given kind of the sign or this confirmation of something, and you just completely surrendered to it and came back and did the YDC and then stayed on for how long after you completed the course?
Well, I stayed on for the rest of that year, but then I had to go back to England, but I didn't intend to stay when I went back the second time.
Well, and I can imagine, being at the ashram and meeting people who are coming from other countries and how difficult it can be for some to stay in Canada in terms of visa and things like that. And so was that kind of a significant component during your experience?
Yes, but I also had a career and a home, so there was quite a lot to actually figure out.
Wow. And so then how did things develop from there? Because I know, and maybe within your answer, you can kind of also talk about your relationship with the ashram now, and as a resident who is often there kind of half the year and then half the year you're in Europe teaching. How did that start to formulate?
Well, it's been through a lot of different phases, so it's hard to encapsulate. I think what I'd like to say at this point is that I was always a little afraid of her in person. And the reason was that I knew my mind had loads of negativity and I thought she could see right into the back of my mind. But I did what she asked the best I could. And I tried to understand what she was really asking or hoping from me, tried to get to that level with it. And so it's like the journey has taken me back and forth between two continents. So my path and that journey are connected, lots of travel in both levels, as it were.
Yeah, it's like the embodying of both the practicality and the mysticalness, but then also being in Canada and then also being in England, that doubleness.
Yes, a lot of realities to deal with, yes.
Mm-hmm. And so after the YDC and kind of coming back, how did your relationship with Swami Radha develop and form?
Well, as I say, I was always a little afraid of her. And as things transpired, I ended up spending a lot more time in Europe while she was still alive than in Canada and at the ashram. And that was because after I'd gone back to sort of sell up and settle everything, the Berlin Wall came down, and that was November 1989. And I was expecting to just come back and live at the ashram and be there. But she sent me a fax back in those days. We had faxes, and it said, "Stay where you are. I'll send people out to train you." And so that was what I did, you see. I stayed there and set up a centre there. And a couple of swamis came over, including Swami Jyotirnanda, who helped me. And what I then did for the next few years was I came back to the ashram every summer. And I redid the teacher training over and over because I was teaching a lot of classes in England at the time. So that was how it worked. And of course, then I met her when I was there and got to know her that way.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious as to, you mentioned you started having kind of interest in yoga before even coming to Canada, but then never quite putting it all together. And then that fear that you sometimes had towards Swami Radha of her seeing your negative thoughts or whatever was in your mind. So how did the teachings then influence that and change perhaps things in your mind and in your life? How did the teachings influence you in the early days?
Well, I mean, the thing was, it was the YDC that was the huge breakthrough. When I did the YDC, that was the huge breakthrough. When I arrived at the ashram, it wasn't because I was looking for Swami Radha. It was just that I knew there was the YDC and I knew I had to come back to Canada. And so those were the obvious things to do. And I had a lot of unresolved grief from bereavements at the time. I was divorced and not happy to be divorced. I'd got a great career, but I didn't have purpose, and I had no outlet for love because I'd had enough grief and divorce experience to know that wasn't my path. I wasn't going to go and marry again. So the YDC allowed me to process all of this. I mean, that was the big thing. I just knew that these teachings were it, if you see what I mean. And I just wanted to give back to the teachings. It was just like, okay, this is it. This is what you do. And once I'd kind of given up my career in order to stay at the ashram, I was kind of in shock for quite a long while. But once I started to teach yoga, it was like, that's it. This is what I need to do. And it was like I landed from my shaky place of having made such a big decision and a big transition. I was at home in the teachings and I knew that that was the right thing for me.
Finally landed to the place that you had seen so many years before.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And how is your relationship to the teachings now? What forms does it take?
Well, I teach online and in person at the ashram and various places around Europe. But I would say really I support the teachings in every way I can. It's to the best of my understanding and as I learn and evolve. So it's like we're all learning and evolving, and it's that process that is what my relationship is.
That's great. Thank you. And I think now is a good time to go into our theme for the day, which is that of peace. And there's a wonderful quote that Swami Sukhananda actually found from Light and Vibration, which is a book from Swami Radha edited by Swami Lalitananda. And I believe this is in the foreword, written by Swami Lalitananda on peace. If we first understand ourselves, our inner world, and the impact of our own thoughts and choices on the world, can we then create the kind of world we would like to live in? A world of peace and harmony, a world based on personal responsibility, understanding, and compassion. So for me, this quote is very beautifully kind of tying in both the inner world and the inner peace with the outer world and the world around us. And so how does this kind of structure your understanding of peace, and what does peace of mind mean to you?
Well, I guess a key goal for me throughout, with the teachings all along, whether I knew it or not at the beginning, has been to find peace of mind. Because as I said, when I took the YDC, I definitely didn't have peace of mind. I was very wrapped up in what had happened in the past. And on top of that, I'm by nature a planner and a problem solver. And my career involved lots of tricky questions and issues and things like that. So I think a lot. It's my nature to think a lot. And so peace of mind for me, at the most basic level, is how do you switch off? How do you use the practices to be kind of fully in the moment and here and present with yourself? So that's been my pursuit, if you like. How do I think about that? It's like, the analogy with the mind like a lake. I'm looking here as I sit talking to you, and there's the lake out there now. And it's like the emotional disturbances can settle and the internal conflicts can be resolved. And then there's stillness, and then the light can shine through. And so the practices are our toolkit for that. And when you bring that stillness into the world, into your relationships, then that stillness can touch others. So you can bring it forward in that way. I don't know if that quite answers your question, but yeah.
It's definitely touching on quite a lot of things. Yeah, this connection between peace and stillness. And I think on my part, it was a little bit cheeky for me to choose this theme in my conversation with you, knowing that you have been teaching the Peace for Professionals course, that it's an online course from the ashram. And yeah, that kind of interplay between stillness and peace, and then how to find peace in movement also, which I assume a lot of the professionals taking the course are trying to work towards.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't matter what kind of job you're in, really, to take the course. But what the groups have in common is that they're people who have a work life and a home life, and they've got to find some balance. And they usually, because they've got these lives going on, many pressures, many choices. And so how do they deal with this? And by working in a group in discussion with others, it doesn't matter what their career is, they've got some things in common. It might be a difficult boss or a really difficult decision, or they've got to set up boundaries or whatever it is. So the course allows them to work with one another through this. And we use the practices, reflection, discussion, unpick the underlying motives and the desires and the goals. And then what are the helpful yogic attitudes and approaches that you can take into any scenario, whether it's an office or a factory or a family life or whatever it is? Acceptance, self-worth, compassion, contentment. There's quite a list, really, of attitudes that you can bolster and support and bring forward in your own mind and then around you. So it's about developing some skillful self-mastery, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Self-mastery to get peace of mind. A little while ago, I had a conversation with Swami Satyananda about harmony was the theme. And so that word harmony shows up in the quote that we just looked at, and that interplay of peace and harmony and stillness, and how it sounds like they're almost in kind of motion together.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah, really.
Coming together.
Yes.
And how was and has been peace part of your relationship with Swami Radha?
Well, I would say that one of her great strengths is integrity. And peace of mind can only really come with integrity. And to me, that's really an important dimension to it. And if I may, I'd like to read a few short quotes from Swami Radha, which touch on the topic. This one is from Divine Light Invocation. To find inner peace, we must let go of the inner struggles of identifying with old images, fears, and resentments. Put energy into the positive aspects of life. Identify with the light that you are. And another one, this one's from Light and Vibration, actually. To live in the light means you have nothing to hide. You don't need to be nervous about being found out. It's essential for inner peace, harmony, and well-being. There's your word again, harmony. And a last one, and this one's from Yoga Path to Awareness. Always remember you are the doer and you can undo. This is really important in life, whether it's a career or whatever your situation. You have the power of choice for your job, your education, your marriage, your partner, your desire for spiritual life. The power of choice is yours. You even have the power to make changes if you discover that the original choice didn't meet your expectations. So I would say that the relationship was about self-inquiry, and for me, giving back with love and carrying forward her work the best I can, and also supporting others who also support the teachings. So making those my motivations through reflection.
Mm-hmm. All those quotes just had so much in them, and kind of relating it to integrity. And there was something that you read about not hiding things from others. And so what that takes to be comfortable and confident in the actions that we take, and not being ashamed of them, but rather being open, and how that can really cultivate that inner peace. How can people access peace of mind today? I know you already touched on kind of the different tools that the teachings offer, and how might that look on a day-to-day basis?
Well, one of the things that I hear in class, in the professionals course, sort of coming back to me, is an increased focus on being in the moment, which kind of sort of started with a little earlier somehow. Can the practices, can the awareness that you're developing through yoga allow you to stop and recalibrate in the moment? It may be as simple as taking a breath and then remembering, what's this core value that I want to work on in this relationship or in this meeting or situation? And I would say that is a key to what I mentioned as self-mastery, that you just take that pause if you can. And that in itself takes practice. It doesn't come, it doesn't just come.
Well, and it takes practice too, to remember those tools and those practices also.
Exactly, yes. So keeping it as simple as you can in the moment is helpful. Breath is a great tool.
Yeah, remembering the breath. Isn't there a saying from Swami Radha's that is like, it's not that people are so bad, it's just that we forget?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
That really plays a part here, it seems.
And you can get caught up, in the speed of things,
Mm-hmm.
the speed of interactions, the speed of your own emotions. They can all catch you up.
Do you feel that today, particularly in the space of the ashram, what role does peace play, and how do you think people who enter into the space can kind of gain inner peace?
Well, I don't think that's a difficult question to answer, really, because it's a very peaceful place, really. You've got the environment, the space, the beach, the lake. You've got the temple. You've got the vibration of the mantra. So slowing down is a really big step that people can take. And the fact that the ashram is remote gives people distance. Swami Radha always spoke to that, if you like, that she realized that she had to get people out of their everyday for them to make really deep change. And so coming here allows you to take that step back away from things and find a route to peace for yourself. You know, sometimes you have to go through some dark places, some bad memories, some traumas, and it's a safe space to do that. And you're surrounded by people who can kind of know where you're at because they've been through their own stuff. And so there's a safety as well in all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that piece is really important too. There's support at the ashram where everyone has such unique experiences. The teachers, you are also your own and with so much integrity. And I think that really influences the way that then when people come and enter into the space, the way that they are able to open and be comfortable. I think it's really incredible. And I've said this multiple times of how incredible I think it is, how individual all the teachers and all of those who have worked so closely with Swami Radha are, and kind of the feel of diversity that brings. And you are the perfect example, coming to Canada all the way from England with your own set of experiences and life kind of unfoldings.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's the reflection that allows us to be our real selves and develop, and that's what we offer to other people, you know, that they, through their own reflection, can become more and more their true real self.
Right, to discover like the inner answers that are there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and that's sometimes, it's both wonderful and also sometimes frustrating piece of, you know, being in a class or being in a conversation with a teacher at Yasodhara Ashram and then asking a question and the response often is, well, what do you think? And so that encouragement to reflect and really think about the life that we're living. And so moving a little bit forward to now, I'm curious as to when do you feel most connected to Swami Radha?
When teaching is a kind of an obvious answer because it doesn't matter. And in some ways, it's wonderful that I do have the opportunity to teach in so many different places, because what I see is that it doesn't matter how new to the teachings people are, or whether they're, you know, they may be on a different path in a different tradition or something, but the light grows in the room and it grows in the students. And so it's right there. And of course, I feel as if I'm doing the right thing, which is a real ingredient for peace of mind, if you like. And there are other places, obviously, at the altar, and especially the beach prayer room here. For me, that's a very good place. And funnily enough, one of the things that touring has done for me is take me to Berlin and right therefore back to her origins. And I've become very interested in reading the history of the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, because they were formative years for Swami Radha. They were what she lived through in Europe that laid a foundation for her before she went to Rishikesh. And she lived through turbulent times, and so do we, which kind of links it back to the peace, you know, idea that how can you have peace of mind in turbulent times? How can you turn things around?
Well, I'm certain that visiting Berlin would definitely kind of bring up certain aspects of her life. And I can say that being in Montreal right now, there's a little part of me that walks around the streets and wonders where it was that she had her spiritual practice and experiences, which then led her to India. And it seems also that places have importance to you, both in the different places that you travel to, and of course, the land and the place of the ashram, and the way that they may cultivate a peace of mind.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to say before we end?
Well, I thought I'd like to end with a quotation from Swami Radhananda, actually, if that's all right.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, please.
To me, it kind of links this issue of the times we live in with the inner work. and it's from living the practice. As we mature spiritually, the subtleties of every day become more evident. We can feel the power of the light. We can gain understanding of the way it works. If we send out vibrations of light, we will create a different atmosphere in the world. Peace and light will manifest. Many people are influenced. It may take years or lifetimes, but every positive thought and action has an effect.
And again, going back to that image, for me at least, of the rippling water and the influences that we have on others and ourselves. So thank you so much for speaking with me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been great. Great to have this opportunity to remember a few things.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Yasodhara Ashram is located on the unceded traditional territory of the Tanaha and Sinixt peoples. You can learn more about the ashram by visiting our website at yasodhara.org. You can also follow us on Instagram and YouTube. Until next time, I'm Katie Taher, and this is My Time with Radha.